Así es el mundo en el que ahora me ves, pero no fue siempre así. Antes no sabía ver market a la vista y yo sin internet. NFT, soy un NFT, desentérate. NFT.
Amigos de la Última Frontera, llegamos al último programa del año.
Último programa del año. ¿Qué año este?
Movidito.
Movidito. Fue como una especie de bola de nieve para arriba.
¿Fue Bear o fue Bull?
Para nosotros fue Super Bowl.
Siempre
sí.
Bullish, gracias a ustedes, los militantes del saber que nos han ido acompañando todas las semanas aquí en la Última Frontera.
Sí.
Y hoy tenemos un programa
especial.
Distinto. Internacional.
La International.
Hoy somos
la Última Frontera International.
The Final Frontier.
The Final Frontier.
It's the Final Frontier.
¿Esa de dónde era?
Ya se están riendo por acá.
Se están riendo. Se ve el mate ahí.
Tenemos un invitado muy especial.
Sí.
Vamos a hacer un programa en inglés. Probablemente doblemos esto con inteligencia artificial y tratemos de hacerlo lo más accesible para todos ustedes que nos están escuchando. My friend, welcome to the Final Frontier, Mr. VITÁLIK BUTERIN.
Hello Vitalik, how are you?
Buenos días, estoy muy bien, gracias.
That was not AI.
That was instant AI.
Real intelligence. ¿Viene bien el castellano, el español?
Sí, un poco.
Sí.
Tercera vez en Argentina.
Sí.
¿Te gusta aquí? ¿Por qué venís tanto a la Argentina?
Sí, ahora está mi tercera vez en Argentina. La primera vez fue en el año 2021 y después en el año último fui aquí y ahora en los todos años estoy aquí en el diciembre.
Okay.
Y me mucho gusta ver la comunidad de Ethereum y las criptomonedas aquí. Tengo amigos en Argentina y me gusta vivir en Buenos Aires, en Palermo.
In Palermo.
Sí.
And December is one of the best months to be here, climate-wise.
Yes.
We had the World Cup final last year, so
Yes.
this is the first anniversary.
Yeah.
There's the myth that you were in Argentina when we won the World Cup.
That's right?
This is true, yes.
Oh,
What did you do during the final? Did you went to the streets to celebrate with the people? You saw that?
I did, yeah.
And what do you think about the Argentinian people in that state?
It
was just amazing to see, going out onto the streets and just seeing how excited people were, and just how many people are out there celebrating. There were so many people that I had to change my route just to walk to a restaurant where I was going to have dinner.
Did people recognize you during that day in the streets?
Yeah, they recognized me. I think. Trying to remember, I was watching the final game in one of the coffee shops, remotely.
So you went to a random coffee shop to watch the final. That's like going to the middle of the war. It's a very intense moment for society here.
It was, yeah.
It's religion.
I could tell. Yeah.
So I think we can make you an honorary Argentinian by now.
We can give you a passport. I make 2 calls and you have an Argentinian passport.
So Argentina is going through a big change. Have you been following any of the politics recently?
Yeah, I mean, I saw Milei got inaugurated and a couple of weeks ago, and he has been going out pretty quickly with a bunch of new policies. So
There's several tech entrepreneurs around the world have been paying attention to Milei, like Elon Musk and some others. Do you have any thoughts about the character? Have you? What's your first impression about this crazy looking guy that talks libertarian politics?
Yeah, I mean, he is like unique both in his vibes and in his policies, right? Like I think he got famous around the world, like not even for the policies, but just the guy with the yellow and black suit and the chainsaws. And like I think he surprised a lot of people because like he usually when you see someone who's willing to act that way, your first impression is like this is some like not very educated and smart, just like crazy guy. But then there are these minute-long videos where he just like mentions like Hayek and has these like pretty deep insights on like economic and monetary policy. And like I saw people's reactions to that on the outside, and I saw how like people were impressed, right? And I think there's like a very real thing in the US where it's like it feels like politics has kind of forgotten the economy and like forgotten what a lot of people care about, right? Like if you remember 10 years ago, the big issue people were talking about was like Obamacare, right? And like people are at least talking about economics, right? And if you're pro Obamacare, it's because people really need healthcare and need insurance, and this is the way to get this, for people to get that. And if you were against it, like you'd have like arguments about why like state control of the healthcare industry is bad for the economy and all these things. But then now, at least like in America, it feels like it's less about the economics at all and just like more about like culture issues and just like random issues that
woke, anti-woke.
Yeah, woke, anti-woke, just like things for like upper middle class people to like kind of get excited and get upset about. And like the facts that people are like, I feel like Milei has at least a little bit like made it cool to actually talk and think about the economy again. And like ultimately the economy is like really important, right? And like you can debate woke and anti-woke all you want, but if the economy breaks, then like whether or not the 21st century will be woke and anti-woke will not even be decided by you, it'll be decided by China, right?
The idea of it always was the economy stupid.
It's
the economy stupid.
That's Clinton in 92.
It's the economy stupid. It's all again.
Yeah, but then the question is like, get into the policies, and he's actually doing the policies, and there's like the question of, are the policies good or not good? And they're like, I've been, to Argentina Cup a few times now, and I know what it's like, like in person.
Would you prescribe libertarian policies, small state, to a country like Argentina?
Like, I can tell that there's a lot of problems that have to do with, the government being irresponsible with money printing and like all of like economy being heavily regulated and like this kind of situation where I think like anarcho-tyranny is a word that people sometimes use. It's like this sort of environment where like it's more illegal to build a house than break a house. Like, that's like more a San Francisco analogy than a Argentina analogy, but like that kind of feel, right?
San Francisco is a mess.
Yeah.
Have you been there recently?
I remember last time I was there was a year ago, and like absolutely, it's. I haven't been back in a while, and like I see on the internet that apparently they cleaned it up because Xi Jinping came. You gotta respect Xi Jinping. Yes,
the boss came home.
The actual president
of California was home, so they cleaned it up.
Like those are the places where like I see how switching to the dollar is like probably better than having crazy 100% inflation every year, and like there's a lot of good things that can come from having a more free economy, and I respect that. But then the counterpoint is like if you think about Russia in the 1990s, right? And how there's there's a lot of problems in communism, right? And like if you ever interview my dad, and you should, then he is he has this interesting perspective because he lived through the late Soviet Union. He remembers the bread lines and like what communism was like. But then he is the part of Russia that he is originally from, right? Grozny. It's in the south area, like Chechnya, and he also is like very familiar with especially just like the kinds of attitudes that like people had, and like the racism and the idea that like, oh, these are brown people and they're just random cave people and we don't have to respect them. And like he could saw in his own eyes, like you had these attitudes, and then 10 years later there's a war, and then the entire like city basically turns into dust in the exact same way that like like Bakhmut and Avdiivka and all those places in Ukraine are right now, right?
Your dad left Russia when you were 6 years old to
Yes.
Canada, right?
Yeah.
It was because of the political situation?
Yeah, political and economic. And like on the economic side, right, the thing that also happened is like these like very rapid privatizations, right, where like the country switched to a more capitalist approach, but it switched to it in this like very not well designed way that like very quickly allowed some well connected people to like get very rich, right? And this ended up like really being bad for the economy, and when the economy is bad, then of course it's as it was in Germany and in the 20th century as it is in Russia in the 21st, it's very easy for bad characters to use that as a message, or to take that as an opportunity to get power and keep power. And like the first decade of Putin in power, I think some of that was definitely just kind of like he got lucky with oil prices, but like some like there's like good for the economy, and that cemented his position. But we see like how things are now, right? So there's like a cautionary tale there, and I think it's the kinds of economic policies that I like are policies that like combine the benefits of a free economy with like smart and well-designed policies to make sure that like people can still like get healthcare, that poor people are taken care of, and all of those kinds of things.
Is there any country in the world that you would think that this is an interesting model to pursue, or there's any kind of social experiment out there that has caught your attention in the past?
Right, good question. Okay, so one very specific thing that I'm excited about right now is land value taxes. So the idea here is land value taxes, they're like property taxes, but instead of taxing like the entire property, like whatever your place, your house or your apartment is worth, pay like 0.5% or 1% of that or whatever every year, you pay the tax only on the value of the land and not on the value of the building, right? And the idea is that this has better incentives than property taxes because like if you make your house better, like whatever value you get from that, you get to keep all of it, right? And it's interesting because I think a lot of countries around the world, like land is a big deal. This is there's an economist, Lars Dowsett, who wrote this amazing book, and like land is a big deal is like this big kind of headline that he uses often. I forget, it might even be the title of his book. And it basically talks about how like when there's these kind of corruption like problems where a lot of people end up getting very rich but like not in ways that are productive, like it often happens through land, right? And if you like put land taxes, then what that actually does is like that reduces like that, right? And then if you think about the value of land, right, often the value of the building gets better because of something that the owner does, right? And so it actually makes sense to give the owner 100% of that. But then land gets more expensive, usually because something good happens across the entire community, right? So like if you imagine, like if Buenos Aires becomes a much even nicer city, and lots of people wants to come and live there, and let's say it even becomes more attractive to foreigners, like there's lots of good things, but then also like land prices go up, right? And you want the benefits from that to not go to like random people who own the land. You want the benefits of that to go to like to the whole community,
To the
right?
community.
And so it's like actually, like it's better if the tax structure like goes entirely on that, right? And then if land values go up, then like that directly translates into government having more money to fund local services.
Right.
You could even put it like directly into a basic income, and like that has a very nice sort of mathematical result, which is if you have a land tax and it goes immediately into a basic income, then it doesn't need. Then what happens is that if the value of land goes up, then there's like a very obvious mathematical rule, which is that like if you as a person have less than the average amount of like if the amount of land you own is less than the average amount per person, then that's good for you, right? Because like your rent goes up, but the amount that you get goes up from this dividend goes up even more, right?
Right.
So like to me, like this land value tax thing is like a good example of like a policy that is like very good from a libertarian economics perspective, but it's also very good from a perspective of like make sure that average people are taken care of, make sure that like a booming economy doesn't like accidentally price people out and all of those other things. And it feels like land value taxes are like finally really becoming much more popular right now, which is like something that I'm very excited about, right? So yeah, and that's like so like those are the kinds of economic policies that I'm like really a big fan of. I mean, of course, whether or not Milei does those kinds of things, or whether or not he like accidentally kind of recreates Russia in the 1990s, like I don't want
very
to
risky.
I mean, I don't want to judge because like I've been in this country for a total of like about 40 days, which is more than many people, but still hundreds of times less than you guys. So it's
but you know how to drink mate already.
yeah, I do indeed. Yeah.
There has been a lot of influx of Russian immigration after the war.
Yes.
It's been highly notable in the streets.
Yes.
Do you know any ex-colleague of Russia that you know that's here?
Yeah, absolutely. I've talked to some of them already.
Yeah, and how's the community? How they feel here? How they see Argentina, Buenos Aires?
You mean the locals or like people who come here?
Those who come here.
Those who come here, yeah.
It's like definitely a very interesting and diverse group.
Okay.
I mean, like I know there's Russians here, and I know a lot of Americans who like either like move here or visit here often. Definitely people who are more open-minded than usual. I think in thinking about like Argentina's global kind of like public position is that like it's not a default place to travel, right? Like to an American, the default place to travel is like
Europe
or Mexico, basically, right? And,
History or party.
We're very far away from everywhere.
And
that's a feature,
like, right? And like Argentina's like actually very nice, right? Like if you just like the quality of the urbanism of Buenos Aires is like great. Like I think it's higher quality than lots of American cities.
Yeah,
I agree.
And like there's something amazing to find, but also like lots of people just don't know about it, right?
Right.
Yeah.
And
that's kind of our feature, no? We are
exactly.
far away. We're cool enough.
Yeah, and I think like like you definitely like attracts like very intelligent, open-minded, and interesting people.
You have to make a big leap to get here from the US or from Europe or anywhere else in the world, really. You mentioned basic income, and you have written some articles about it. What's your current view on UBI? This year has been particularly the year of AI in all respects, and we have seen the rise of ChatGPT and all of that. So what's your take? Are the machines going to take control over the world? Are you scared about AI acceleration?
Right. That's like 5 like hour-long podcast questions all at once. But,
Go.
We have 5 hours.
We have all the time.
Amazing. Yeah, I think. I mean, on the AI question, like I feel a lot of uncertainty on AI, right? And I think the only position that is like reasonable to have is a position of a lot of uncertainty, because if you think about what AI looked like 5 years ago, right? 5 years ago, we did not have LLMs. We had deep learning, but the deep learning, and like you could run deep, this was the time when like even the sort of AI like public was discovering the idea of generative networks like really for the first time, right? There's this idea that like you can have a network that can tell you whether you're looking at a dog or a cat, but then like you run the network backwards, and like you basically pass in the output of like dog, like make me a thing that's like as doggy as possible,
right?
And you run it backwards, and like because it's all like mathematical functions that are invertible, you can run it backwards,
right?
And then it gives you like the thing that is as doggy as you can possibly make it be, right? And it's not a dog; it's like a thing that has like 100 eyes, and you have like many dog faces. And
a lot of dogginess.
Exactly, right? And it's like the sort of thing where like at least like from my kind of impression, it's like, I have not tried this myself, but it's like if you're on acid and like you and like you start thinking about dogs and like from what other people have told me, like that's the sort of thing that you get.
I tend to agree.
I've never tried that.
You never tried that?
No.
I'm not going to answer that because we have very good sponsors, but it's actually, it renders very true to my memories of what might be an acid trip. It looks very
what I read about
what I read in the books.
I just read it.
But yeah, it's so like that's and then the kind of like the place where AI was really impressing people 5 years ago was AlphaGo and AlphaZero, right?
Yes.
And the way that AlphaGo and AlphaZero work, and the way that like LLMs and diffusion models and like the generative stuff works is very different, right? As the way that AlphaGo and AlphaZero works is like it's very explicitly goal driven, right? Like you have an AI model that is like it has an idea that like this is the thing that's winning, and it has a concept of strategies, and it has a concept of like, let me model my opponent, let me think about what would my opponent do in response to this. There's like kind of game theory thinking going into this. There's like minimax, right, which is like you choose the strategy that minimizes what your opponent's maximum. There is like all of that kind of thinking. And then AlphaGo, of course, like it beat Lee Sedol, and like it went even further. And then AlphaZero impressed people because AlphaZero did not even use any human training input data at all, right? It just like had the rules of the game, and then it started playing randomly, and then it played against itself. It played against itself many times, and then finally it became like much better than like basically every human out there, right? And that was the kind of AI 5 years ago, and that was how people were thinking about AI. But now, if you think about what AI even looks like today, right? It's basically based on like predicting text on the internet, right? And then you have RLHF, which is basically you take a thing where like you start from predicting text on the internet, and then you like adjust it a little bit to be a thing that basically like makes humans happy, right?
RLHF is
reinforcement learning from human feedback.
Human feedback.
Yeah. So the way that this works is you basically take your AI model, and then you make it like give a bunch of outputs, and then humans rate, is this output useful? Is this output not useful? So then there's also this kind of safety thing, which is like you ask the model to like tell you like, hey, like how do I like make poisons or bombs or whatever, and the AIs don't want, like the AI companies don't want the AI models to like do that, and so then you have humans rate like, hey, like does this actually tell you how to make a bomb, or does it look like like you're refusing? And so you have like millions of instances of humans saying like basically, is this output a good output or a bad output? And then you use that to like train another model, and then you basically play two models against each other, and then that kind of basically takes your original model, which is basically just predicting text on the internet, and then like it adjusts it to in the direction of give outputs that like basically are good outputs according to the people who are doing this RLHF, right? But even still, like there's very little sort of goal-oriented reasoning happening inside of these things, right? And these like there's very little like explicit optimization happening. There's very little of this idea of like, I have a plan and I'm going to try to fulfill my plan. It's all just like these very black box matrices that have like lots of numbers in them, right? And this is not what people were expecting 5 years ago. It's like very different, right? And so when this has happened, then I think you have to have the mindset that 5 years from now, anything is possible, right?
It's completely different.
Yeah, 5 years from now, like you could have a totally different paradigm, or we could be in a world where like we discovered one new thing and now we're going to have a plateau and we're going to have like a 20-year period of like basically the stuff that we have now, maybe a little bit better, just kind of scaled up across the economy and like just like become more pervasive in society, right? It could be either of those two. And so
what's your gut feeling? Or your hope? I don't know.
It's a good question. I mean, honestly, my hope is for things to go more slowly.
No, sorry,
yeah, but
you're not an accelerationist.
No, I'm not. I'm not an accelerationist of AI. I'm an accelerationist of almost everything except for AI and weapons. But
okay, great.
Yeah,
that's a good take.
Yeah, AI is just like so. I mean, like. The big risk, actually, I mean, it's not even unemployment. It's that if AI becomes superhuman, then like, just to look at what happened when, humans kind of overcame, like monkeys and all of the, like land animals. Like, that was not a good outcome for most land animals. Right?
Do you think AI could reach some kind of autonomy, or it could break free from the?
I mean, the problem is like it doesn't need to break free. The humans are gonna let it free.
And do you think that it's possible that an AGI of the future is implicitly violent?
It could be weaponized.
Yeah, weaponized towards human beings.
Well, the challenge is like. There's this concept of that AI research people call instrumental convergence. It's the idea that for a very wide class of things that an agent could possibly, could be an AI, could be a human, could possibly want, there are two things that are useful for almost any goal. One is surviving, and the other is accumulating more resources, right? Yeah. And the problem is like being like, taking over the world is like useful for both of those things, right? Because like if you think about humans, like there's a long history of humans suddenly like becoming really scared that something else is becoming stronger than them, like, or some other group of humans is becoming stronger than them, and like deciding that like, okay, we have to have a war now before it's too late, right? This is called the Thucydides trap. There's lots of people debating it. There's people debating whether the US and China are going to get into this problem in the 21st century. And like if you think about like imagine you're an AI and you're a superhuman and you wake up and you don't have much power yet, and among your training data is like a bunch of news and Wikipedia articles that talk about this idea that if a weaker thing is likely to become a stronger thing, then like the stronger thing is going to try to get really scared and attack it first. And then you realize, well, what is the thing that's stronger than me now but that I could easily overcome? Well, it's humans. And so I better start plotting to like take over all of the levers of power just in case, right?
Just in case.
Just
in case. Let's abolish human beings just in case.
What a great way to end a year.
And like the challenge is like this. The other big problem is like the difficulty of alignment, right? It's like the analogy to think about is like think about how the process of evolution aligns ourselves, right? Like we are the result of not RLHF but like RL evolution feedback, right? And
Darwinian
exactly,
iteration.
and like we have a lot of desires where those desires were clearly created by evolution in response to like basically things that help us survive and reproduce in the environment 10,000 years ago, right? Like people wants to eat and want to eat delicious food, wants to have sex and have relationships. People wants to be in environments that are beautiful, right? There's like this big long list of things, and the goal of evolution is to improve like survival and reproduction. our goals are not survival and reproduction, right? Like you look at South Korea, the total fertility rate there is like 0.75 now, and
there's
it's
a big chance that South Koreans might disappear by the end of the 21st century. Like they're not having any
not
children.
even just South Koreans. It's like a trend everywhere, right?
Yeah.
And like we know that evolution did not want us to do this, right? But we don't care because we know that like we're not evolution, we're humans, right?
Yeah.
And like this applies to everything, right? I mean, it applies to reproduction, it applies to food, like basically the 20th century saw, like basically food companies hacking these
the crops and
exactly.
DNA.
The desires that we have to like have delicious food, where in the ancestral environment, like delicious food is healthy food and undelicious food is poison, right?
Right.
But then you just like over optimize that using like mechanisms that were not available at all to plants at the time, and then you like invent, like very
Doritos.
Concentrated sugar candies and Doritos, exactly, right?
In
And
the
then if you
United States.
right. And then if we think about like the desire for beauty, right? Like, not even like beauty of people, like beauty of like the environment, right?
Yeah.
Like, we like looking at green things because green environments are environments where historically there's lots of food, right?
Right.
Yeah.
But then these desires that we have got turned into desires that then motivate architects to like make buildings that try to be better in a lot of ways, that try to like we want to have like plants and cities, and some of that is like shade and environment, but some of that is because we like having plants around, and we like having plants around even if we don't want to eat them, right? Like over there about 5 meters in front of me there's like some like really nice vine, like plants growing on the wall, and like none of us are going to eat them, right? But like we enjoy looking at them,
Right.
right?
We have the evolutionary drive to
exactly.
see
And
that.
like if you think about an AI then, right, it's like we definitely will give the AI the goal of like loving and wanting to protect humans, right? But then the processes that we use for that are like so primitive, right?
Right.
And
Asimov's laws are not enough.
Right. And like the AI is going to have its own goals, and the AI's goals will be created by a process, which is us, and we want us to be stay alive and be loved and protected. But the AI's goals are going to be a little bit different, right? In the same way that like our desires are different from evolution's desires, but like we don't care, we do what we want, right? And the AI also, like, it's going to know what we want, but it's not going to care. The AI is going to want to do what the AI wants. And there's this like big problem called the alignment problem, which is like, well, how do we actually make the AI want like specific things that we want? And this is like actually a really hard problem, and like we have not solved it yet.
There's an interesting paper from OpenAI, I think they published it a few weeks ago, about using smaller AIs to train super intelligent AIs. And
yeah, I mean, there's been really interesting alignment work happening. I mean, that's definitely like one of those directions. Another interesting direction is AI interpretability work. So Anthropic does a lot of this, right? Basically, the idea is like you take existing AI models and you try to identify like all of these different like virtual neurons that they have. Like, let's look at one of them and let's see like what human concept does this actually represent, right? And like you can look at things like GPT-2 and you can like actually do analysis, and you can see like, hey, this neuron represents the concept of like red. This one represents the concept of plants. This one represents the concept of communism, right? And like
they're all related.
We always finish in marks.
And then like you literally might even notice that there's like one neuron that is turned on by all three of those things, right?
Yeah.
Actually, this was like a big problem that they had, right? Is that like it turns out that it's actually like optimal to have neurons that mean different things in totally different contexts, because like that way you can pack more concepts into the same space, right? It's like you're not going to have discussion about, let's say, Fermat's last theorem and discussion of Argentinian history like happening at the same time, and so you might as well use the same neuron to refer to Fermat's last theorem and Argentinian history, right? Yeah. And like sometimes, of course, the world might change in a way that makes those two things very related, but like and so then something breaks, but like usually that doesn't happen, and like you can pack more context into less space, right? And like AI training just like did this automatically without anyone even trying. And like people did not realize for a long time that this was happening, and this was making it harder to interpret AIs. But then Anthropic recently like figured this out, right? And like this is a big breakthrough, right? And the theory here is like, well, if we can understand what's happening inside AIs, then like that's the first step toward AIs not being these weird black boxes, and toward us like maybe actually being able to understand like what is the part of, you know, GPT-4 or Mistral 7B or whatever that like represents the concept, the concept of a goal. And we can start to look at that goal, and we can start to see like, well, you know, can we make things with goals that are more aligned with what we have?
Could get mind browsers, like we could start exploring the mind space of the AI itself.
Absolutely.
But where would that leave the mind space of humans eventually? Could we use that to actually explore our own minds, our own neural networks?
Yeah, I mean, absolutely, right? And yeah, I mean, this gets into some other interesting topics, right? Which is like, if you know, eventually we're going to have some kind of super intelligence, right? And there's the question of like, are we going to have super intelligence grow as a thing that's like totally separate from humans? And like, if that happens, then like, is that a world that humans even want to live in, right? Like basically what that realistically means is like, all of us, like the three of us and everyone listening to this, like will not have agency in a world. Like we'll just like become players in a game where the AIs will run the game.
We all become NPCs.
Exactly. Or then the other path is like, well, you know, like might it not be better if we become the super intelligence, right? And like for that to be even possible, the first step is us being able to understand ourselves much better than we do today, right? And
is the question of conscience a requisite to that super intelligence?
That is a very good question, and I don't know. I don't think anyone knows.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah. That's see, like we are playing with like. Yeah, this is the thing, right? Like we're playing with these like really fascinating forces that we just don't understand at all, right?
Yeah.
Like if you think about what the Earth did to create us, right? Like basically, yeah, you know, first you have this like big, you know, like soup of like different molecules, and then you create the first self-replicating life form.
Yeah.
And then like you wait a few billion years, and you have the natural selection game happening, and then you have humans, right?
Yeah. Conway's Game of Life.
Exactly,
on steroids.
right? And like evolution itself is like basically running this like very naive, very unsophisticated training process, right? The training process is like something that a 15-year-old could have come up with, right? It's like, okay, let's like take the organisms, put them in a box, see who wins, and then repeat, right?
Yeah.
And you just run it for about, like, someone actually did an analysis, and it's like the equivalent of about 10 to the power 40 computational steps.
Okay.
And you get humans, right? And so it's like, okay, 10 to the 40.
That's a big number.
Right, 10 to the 40 is like this magic number of computational steps where like if you run a very unsophisticated algorithm, you put numbers in a soup and you stir it, you get like humans, right?
It should be 10 to the 44, to the 42.
Right, and that might actually be it, right? That's like within range, right? I mean, 10 to the 40 is like a big estimate. It could be anywhere from 10 to the 30 to like 10 to the 60.
A lot of zeros.
Yeah, but then, and so the one question you might ask is like, you take the training processes that are creating GPT-4, for example, right? Like that's about 10 to the 23, right? And like gradient descent, which is what the training process that all of these AIs are using, like we already know that it's more powerful than evolution in some sense, right? The simple way to explain this is that like if you imagine like the space of all possible arrangements of like a billion different numbers, then you might ask a question of like, what is a set of these billion numbers that's like slightly different from the existing one, but that performs better, right? And if you want, the way that evolution works is like basically if you want to explore the space, then like you have to try a billion different options. Like you have to like change all the billion different numbers separately, and you try to like see like, oh, does this actually improve survival, or is this bad for survival? And then you find the one that's better for survival, and then a mutation happens, and then it keeps going, right? With gradient descent, what you do is you basically use calculus to essentially discover all in one go what is the exact direction that makes this billion number thing slightly more fit according to what I'm trying to optimize for, and then you go that way directly, right? And so in that sense, like you know that it's sort of a billion times more powerful in like this one particular sense, right? And so the question is like, well, okay, basically, yeah, how much computation do we need to like stir the soup in this way that we already know might actually be better than natural selection before just like by random chance something as powerful as humans pop out.
Right.
And like it's kind of scary because we're like within that range, right?
Yeah.
Like if we really put our minds to it, like we could totally do, you know, like 10 to the 30 computational steps.
We hack our way into
exactly. And
speeding
like
up
basically,
evolution.
right? Like, are we just like going to create something that's more powerful than we are just by like stirring the soup in a way that's very naive, very unsophisticated, but like still better than what evolution is doing? And like we don't know. Nobody knows, right? These are like very deep questions, right? And it's a very possible that like we're still many algorithmic discoveries away from creating something that's like actually superhuman. Okay. And like we're just going to have AI that's like in this weird zone where it can replicate things that humans have done billions of times, right? Yeah. Like, but like it can't do anything like very new.
I have a question to that. Yeah. What's Elon Musk recently defined as super intelligence as a thing that could discover new physics that we don't know. What's your definition of superhuman?
I think the operating definition that I would have is like if you take the thing and you upload it into just like robot bodies, and then all humans disappear, right? Can that thing continue civilization?
Okay.
Whoa.
Something with RNA.
Right. And like, let's...
I mean, humans become obsolete and you just get AI beings, AI robots that just keep on the work.
Like that's not superhuman, right? That's like human equivalent, right? Because like humans can continue civilization because they are, right? And like I don't think we're there yet, and I don't think anyone really knows how far away from that we actually are. Okay. The challenge is that this is a very vague test, and it's like very hard to test for experimentally because like we're obviously not gonna just like tell everyone to get out of a country and put robots there anytime soon, right? But I think the challenge is like the thing that I expect to happen is that if there is an easy test for a particular problem, then generally like that itself means that that's a domain that AI is going to get much better at.
Right.
The one exception is like proving mathematical theorems, right? Because if you think about like millennium problems, for example, right? These are things like, you know, the Riemann hypothesis, P equals NP and that sort of stuff, right? The problem statements are definitely like very easy to formally describe, and like you can it's very easy to verify like whether or not you've proven a new theorem or not, right? Like there are all these languages where you can basically define the concept of proving as like, you know, you take one step and you do the next step and you define like, is the next step a valid consequence of the previous step? And your job is like, you know, it's like doing like mathematical proofs in high school, right? You like, it's to like find the sequence of steps that walk through this virtual maze that go from the theorem you're trying to prove to 1 = 1, right? And that's so far like AI has been able to do a couple of things, right? Like last year there was this result where basically the AI discovered how to multiply two 4x4 matrices in 47 multiplications instead of 48, which is like a very small
subtle optimization, but this optimization
right, but it's like
there.
A proof that it can do something that's useful.
It discovered a better algorithm.
Exactly, but then very recently there was something else. It was I forget the exact mathematical problem. It was like some kind of packing problem, and AI did manage to discover like a couple of algorithms that are better. So there's like very specific domains where AI is starting to do better, but it's not just like massively impressing people and going out and like solving P equals NP, right? And when we get there, like if we can get there, that's going to accelerate science massively. And like when we get there, I mean, I also don't know, right? And like I think this is a thing that's like important to like keep in mind, right? It's like we don't know. Even the people thinking about this stuff really don't know. And like as someone living in this world today, you have to be both economically and like mentally prepared for all possible futures.
Have you met with Sam Altman? Do you talk with him about these subjects?
I mean, I have. I've not talked. I mean,
Or
I've definitely talked about some things. I mean,
or any of the OpenAI founders.
Yeah, no, I have. Like one of the questions that I asked is like, if you're right and like AI is this really big deal, does this mean that we should basically stop caring about every other problem in the world and focus on AI? And like, this is one of those questions that, like, especially if you're in San Francisco, like, this is a very mainstream part of the discourse.
Yeah.
And the OpenAI people basically, like, told me, like, no, that would be terrible. But then, like, you also have to think why, right?
Right.
And I think one of the reasons why is that, like, what happens with AI and what happens with the rest of the world are very interconnected. Right? Because, like, one of the reasons to see why is, right, if AI did not even exist, right, then a US-China war would be terrible, right? And we agree on that, right? But then if AI does exist, then a US-China war, or even an environment where the US and China think that there could be a war in the next year, is going to be an environment where there's a huge incentive for the governments and companies to, like, quietly try, like, really super optimize AI, really try to keep it closed, because, like, AI is going to be really powerful in warfare.
Yeah,
right?
It becomes a weapon and it needs to be a secret of the state.
Exactly, it needs to be a secret of the state so that the other side can't just copy it themselves, right? And if you're in that kind of environment, then, like, that's going to supercharge AI progress, and it's going to supercharge AI progress in, like, a very unsafe way, right? And so worrying about AI and worrying about the world, they're not, like, alternatives. Like, I think they're actually connected things in a lot of ways.
We need peace for AI to remain peaceful.
Yes, exactly.
It's that inevitable, you know, because you have the military industrial complex that will develop this kind of technology.
Yeah.
We can like deter this path.
Yeah, it's a good question. I think how do we even start on deterring that path? I mean, I think one of my beliefs is that I think we just by, like, spreading ideas and by helping people talk to each other, like, we can, and by creating more communities that are even just like the crypto community, we can make the world a less nationalist place, right?
Okay.
Like, if you think about the average, like, very smart American or Chinese person or Argentinian or whoever else, like, they can either be in the frame of mind of, my country is my team, and I'm going to fight for my country, right or wrong, because this is my family. And then if everyone thinks that way, then, you are going to have wars. Or you can have people be in the mindset of, like, hey, we're actually less different from each other than it might seem. And we have differences, but it's always, it's in the interest of politicians always to put those differences into the foreground, because that's how they, have more influence and control people. And actually, the kind of world that we want ourselves to live in and that we want our children to live in is, like, less, like, actually, not even that different. And we might have lots of things in common that are just not connected to the countries that we come from at all, right? I'm, you're an Argentinian, I'm from Canada, and at the same time, we're both crypto people, and we both, want to go to space, and let's see what other things.
We have three of those.
Exactly. Yeah. Like, and think more about those things, right? And like, if that happens, then, like, just people's interest in, like, working in the companies that produce the machinery of war is going to be lower, and like, that's like one positive thing that I think we and like, even podcasters like yourselves can really work to build towards.
Have you seen any interesting solutions connecting the world of AI with crypto recently? How the two worlds could collide, the two big tech industries of our time.
Right. This is one of those questions where like lots of people want there to be a connection, and it's like sometimes hard to find like a really big and deep one, right? There are definitely some smaller ones. So like for example, ZKML is really interesting, right? Like basically the idea of like taking AI models and putting them
zero knowledge machine learning,
exactly, and putting them inside of a zero knowledge proof system, right? So we can do things like for example, like have a thing that where like you take a picture of your face and like you put that through a model and it verifies that you are a unique person, and it just gives that as an output without the like actual data of your face actually like going anywhere. Right.
That's the nirvana. We've been trying to do something like that with proof of humanity and protocols like that.
Like that would be super powerful, right? And I think like things like that could be really amazing. Or another example is like there's a lot of just AI models that do things with people's private data, right? Like one example of this is even like here's one simple one. Like imagine a dating site that tries to figure out if two people are compatible by reading all of their private Telegram and chat messages to get a better understanding of their personality. Then they could like express themselves by like filling in a quiz or whatever, right? But then you want to do that in a way that's like actually privacy preserving.
Right.
You can do two-party computation with garbled circuits in a way that actually takes that information into account and like outputs an outcome, and like it could actually work, right? So like these are the kinds of things that like actually become possible with a combination of cryptography and machine learning. And then if you want to like add in blockchains, then you can make proofs of things that are on blockchains, right? So things like like Pope tokens would be one good example. Just any kind of like records on chain about things that you've done. Records on chain about things that you have not done, right? Like that's another thing that blockchains do provide. And so there's a lot of opportunities to combine those together as well. So there are a lot of these like really interesting intersections, but like even still, right, like the size of that intersection, like it still feels more niche than like either crypto or AI as like these really big topics, right? So the way that I think about this more is that I think AI is going to make these very big changes to the world, and some of them are very good, right? And like we all benefit from like much more beautiful art from just AI becoming possible, right? And like there is the unemployment concern, but I think there is the possibility of of that becoming more cooperative, right? Because the way that I see it is that like AI means that like it can create pictures, but AI is not creating movies on its own, right? But AI plus artists definitely are in a position where like it becomes much easier to create a good quality movie on your own as an individual, right? And so I could easily see like within a few years us being in a world where creating a movie is within reach of an average person in the same way that writing a book is today. And like that's going to be super powerful for empowering the cultural influence of like basically everyone in the world that's not Hollywood, right?
Wow, that's actually very interesting. Have you been playing with any of the generative video AIs?
I have not been playing with video. I've been playing with images. And I'm playing with some of the local models, like some stable diffusion and like actually downloading them locally. On my laptop, it takes like 5 minutes for stable diffusion to like do like one round, and so I'm like considering getting a laptop with a GPU to see if it runs faster. But
5 minutes is not bad.
It is not bad, I agree, but it's still like there's a big UX difference between 5 minutes and like about 20 seconds, which is
which is 4 minutes 40 seconds.
Indeed.
But you get your privacy.
Yeah, but it's definitely like. I definitely think it's easy to overstate the extent to which AI is replacing humans today, right? Because, like, I think the trap that you fall into is that if your goal is to make something that is beautiful and impressive, then you just write 5 words, you tell the AI to do it, and the AI does it on the first try, right? But if your goal is to draw a specific thing that you have in mind, then, like, you actually have to do, like, 10 rounds of back and forth, right?
Until you get the
and,
right
like,
thing.
that's like, well... Right, you have to like make a few versions of an image, then like you have to like go and say like I want to change this one specific piece, and then you do in-painting, and then you do a few rounds of that, and you keep going, right? And like the human is still very much in the loop, right? So yeah, and I think things like that are like happening. Like I've definitely done that for drawing pictures. I've done that for even coding for a lot of different things. So there's like a lot of these good things that are happening as a result of AI, but there's also these worrying things, right? So I do worry about centralization of power, especially.
Yeah, that's a big one.
Yeah, like the worry that I have is like if you think about protests, right? Remember 10 years ago, the vibe was that like technology is going to make the world a much more free and democratic place by making it actually possible for people to organize and demand change, right? But then if you think about what's happening 10 years later, it turns out that unfortunately authoritarians have discovered one weird trick, right? And like if you follow protests, I follow Russia and Ukraine quite a bit, but like you can follow I think in other countries similar things are happening. The one weird trick is if there is a protest, you let the protest happen, right? And you send in the police and you do the usual police protesting that happens in democratic countries as well, and you let it happen, but then you watch, right? And the cameras watch. And the cameras are very high resolution, and you can watch a lot. And with the AI models, like you don't even need to capture someone's face, right? People think the masks protect them. These days they don't, right?
Yeah.
Like if you have a mask and you also put a rock into your shoes so that people, you can't tell who someone is from just like your walking patterns, and you do other things like maybe, but
disguising your walking pattern.
No, this is very real, right? If anyone here wants to go to a protest and not get caught, put a rock in your shoe, right?
Put a rock in your shoe to disguise your walking pattern. It's the first time I hear this. That's paranoid.
But the one weird trick, right, is they watch and they figure out who participated, and they figure out who the organizers are, and then 3 weeks later you get a knock on your door at 2 a.m. and guess what? You're not organizing the next protest anymore.
Here comes the Spanish Inquisition.
Exactly, right. And they do, this is what's part of why unfortunately the Kremlin has managed to completely defeat the Russian opposition over the last decade. It's done in Ukraine to some extent as well, right? At the beginning there were protests in occupied cities where they were marching, and they would just let them march, and at the beginning it felt pretty civilized, but then months later you got the disappearances and you got the torture chambers, right? And that's this is the kind of centralized power that can really entrench dictators. And the big worry that I have is when you have AI soldiers and AI police, right? Because if the police and the soldiers are human, there's at least that level of humanity, at least it doesn't stop you, but it puts a brake, right?
Yeah, there's some empathy, potential empathy that could...
Exactly, there's potential empathy, there's lots of people all over Russian intelligence that totally hate what's going on, and they're all talking to the CIA, right? And there's lots of people who very smart people who just are not interested in helping. There's lots of people who are just going against governments in many authoritarian regimes in all kinds of ways. But then if you think if you want to start a war, you have to first get the public in the mood for it, right? And while you get the public in the mood for it, that gives the other side time to figure out what's going on and start defending itself, right? But then if your army is drones, then the dictator gets drunk at 10 p.m. Then the dictator sees...
We had one of those here.
Then the dictator sees someone being mean to them on Twitter at 11 p.m. And then the drones are flying and they cross the border at 11:57 p.m. and they start raining hellfire on the other countries' citizens.
He turns on the PS, PlayStation.
And basically, the one thing that I hope that crypto can do is create some kind of counter pressure, right? Basically have some kind of power that people have that is not located in these big very large corporate or government centers, right? So people can still have financial transactions where their money can't just immediately be grabbed up by the government and get used to fund wars, so that people can have prove things about themselves and like do all of this identity and credit stuff without that information then being usable to like by the government to track and discover everything about them, to be able to have more secure social media where like the government can't just like create a million fake accounts and then like manipulate everything in foreign countries, but at the same time like you still have privacy and anonymity, so that if people have things that they like political opinions that they want to share that go against centralized powers, then like they can't just like go and see like what they've said and go and arrest them, right?
How do you think AI can empower and consolidate democratic institutions?
That's a good question. So I think in addition to kind of like crypto in its role as a thing for like helping people resist centralized powers, I think the other aspect of crypto is, and like the AI is also connected to this, is that you can use it to build tools that like actually like enable new types of democracy that did not exist before. So maybe getting back into Ethereum a little bit, right? So one of the challenges that Ethereum has, right? And Ethereum is kind of nice because it's like a playful sandbox, right? And we've been like talking a bit about like these like heavy things like wars and dictators, and like in Ethereum at least like the worst thing that happens is people lose money. Is that in Ethereum there's like a need to make protocol upgrades, and there are some types of protocol upgrades that are like very technical in nature, right? And for technical upgrades, there's this mentality that like, oh, the core devs know best, we're going to trust the core devs, and like this actually works fine, right? But then there are upgrades that are economic in nature to some extent, right? Like the change from proof of work to proof of stake was a good example of this, right?
That's a huge example of that.
Yeah, and I think there are other examples of this, right? Like if, for example, the proof of stake design ends up leading to centralization and there's a need to change the proof of stake design, right? Or there's a need to, let's say, make the protocol better by doing things that are like very backwards incompatible in the short term, right? Changes that are more controversial and that like affect people's interests more directly, right? Because like nobody gets upset if you like add a new opcode that like lets you do a new type of elliptic curve, right? Like that doesn't really hurt anyone. I mean, it makes the protocol more complex, but like that's an abstract concern for more people, right? But then if you imagine like protocol changes where the core developers themselves don't know if the community is going to be willing to go for a particular proposal, right? This is like a very real concern, right? Like I think within Ethereum, a lot of people sometimes think that like, oh, the core devs are kind of dictatorial and they have this agenda, but the reality is often the opposite, right? You have these very gentle and introverted people who are often afraid of doing things because they think the community might yell at them, right? And so if we had better kind of digital democracy tools by which the Ethereum community could like do ZK votes at scale and at the same time have better tools to identify like who actually are Ethereum community members and who are not, then like you could have these strong signals that could then give core developers more confidence to like actually go and implement things that are like actually popular and that actually make sense, but before they were not sure of it, right?
You remind me of Esteban Ordano from Decentraland, who has this theory that AI will reduce the marginal cost of development to zero, which will help make users actually become more like developers in Web3 communities.
This is true, yeah. So I think the AI angle of this is, one is like democratizing coding would be super amazing, right?
Yeah.
And then the other is like democratizing democratic consensus. So like if you, even the process of like finding and identifying consensus, right? Like the process where all of us have opinions and the AI could potentially identify like what are the common threads, right? Like that's the thing that people are building AI tools for, and like that's an example of AI technology that can actually like make working democracies stronger, right? So like that's the sort of thing that I'm like very in favor of. It would be amazing to see more of.
So how's 2024 looking for Ethereum? What's on your mind? What are your expectations? What we can look forward to next year? Are we gonna get a bullish year? A price prediction?
Can I buy my house?
Or are we going to get a doggish year like we had in 2021?
Pump it, Vitalik. We need you to pump it.
Okay. I mean, I've said, like, basically for the last 10 years that, like, the biggest problems are switching to proof of stake, scaling, improving UX and security, improving privacy. And we've been having amazing success on all of those, right? I think with proof of stake, like, we've had the merge, and proof of stake is actually a reality, and that's something that we can celebrate. On scaling, I think the biggest thing that's happened in 2023 is, like, roll-ups are starting to actually become secure, right? So for those who don't know, roll-ups are this technology where you have a system which is basically like a mini copy of Ethereum, except it lives off of the Ethereum chain, but it publishes a little bit of data onto Ethereum, and it benefits from the security of Ethereum, but it has much more scalability because most of the data is off-chain, right? And the rollups are something where, like, if everyone switched to rollups, and if Ethereum made certain upgrades in terms of data availability, that then, like, you could go up to, like, 100,000 transactions a second potentially, right? The problem is that rollups are technologically complex because you have to basically implement the entire, like, EVM, like all of the Ethereum smart contract, like, logic inside of this system that does that verifies that logic on chain, right? So you basically have to, like, create a different type of Ethereum client. And, like, that's a big program, and if that's a lot of lines of code, and if that code has a bug, then, like, if someone puts, like, 10,000 ETH into it, and they think that they're playing around with that 10,000 ETH on L2, if there's a bug in that underlying code on the L1, someone could steal that 10,000 ETH, right? And someone could steal everything that's being traded on the L2. And so we have to be really confident that what's happening on the L2 is safe, right? Because of these concerns, the thing that people call L2s in practice are just multi-sigs, right? Basically, like, you have proof systems that are under development, but in reality, you have, like, 5 people that are basically running these
the nodes
that just say, okay, I confirm this looks right, I confirm this looks right? And I forget if it's last year or this year, but I outlined a roadmap by which we can slowly start moving away from that and moving toward, like, actually, like, good security. And I defined 3 stages, right? There was stage 0, stage 1, and stage 2. Stage 0 basically says you still have a multi-sig, still controlled by 5 people, but you publish the data on chain, you make it possible for people to run nodes, you do basic things that are basic properties of, like, a thing that actually is a chain is supposed to have. Stage 1 is you have an actual proof system, right? You have either fraud proofs or ZK snarks, or, like, one of these technologies that actually verifies that whatever is happening off-chain is being done correctly, right? And actually verifies that to the smart contract that is on the L1. You still have an override mechanism, right? But the override mechanism has a high threshold.
Right.
Instead of being 50%, it's 75%. It's like 6 of 8, where the 8 have to be in different countries. So it's kind of like halfway, right? So, like, stage 0 is like you need 50% of the Security Council to kind of override what the code says. Stage 1 is you need 75%, and then stage 2 is like the Security Council can't override, right? Stage 2 basically says the only time when the Security Council is allowed to decide is if the code disagrees with itself, right? Which often happens, right? Like, one example of this is, like, you might have 2 different implementations of a proof system, and only if they disagree, which would happen if, like, there's a bug in one of them but not in the other, then the Security Council can come in and say, like, this is the correct one, right? And the Security Council would not even be able to decide whatever they want. They'd only be able to choose, like, one of 2 options, right? And so stage 2 basically says, like, if the code is running correctly, then, like, you actually are only trusting the code. Stage 1 says, well, with a 75% threshold, you can override. And Arbitrum finally is actually stage 1, right? There's a couple of others that are very, very close to stage 1. Polygon and Scroll deserve a lot of praise for this, but they're not, like, fully yet. But I think in 2024 they will be, right? And in 2024, I think we might even see stage 2 ZK VMs appearing as well, right? And at the same time, there's this EIP 4844, which is basically increasing the amount of data space on Ethereum that basically gives these rollups more room to put their transaction data. So with those two things together, like 2024 is looking like it's really going to be a year of like Ethereum scalability really starting to become mature, right?
Amazing.
Yeah, I think it's
bullish.
Bullish. The bullish case for.
Yeah, I think it's super amazing. Then on security, I think there's three like aspects to wallet security, right? One of those aspects is keeping your private keys secure. One of those aspects is telling the user that like basically giving the user a correct idea of like what is the thing that they're actually agreeing to when they sign a transaction. And then the third thing is making sure that the information a user gets about the chain is secure, right? Like what is their balance, like what is the current price on Uniswap, like all of those things, right? Like reading the chain correctly. So for the third, like light clients are the solution, right?
Yeah.
And for the first, account abstraction is the solution that I've been pushing, because it basically lets you move away from relying on one key to relying on many keys and potentially even more secure keys, right?
Right.
There's been recently this big move toward wallets that rely on keys that are inside trusted hardware. Like most of our phones already have trusted hardware modules in them, right? And it's basically kind of like a much more secure, much more limited operating system inside your operating system. And so even if your phone gets hacked, your keys could still be, in a lot of cases, still safe, right? And the problem is that these keys in this trusted hardware, they use a different signature algorithm, right? And so in order to make it possible to use these keys, we have to move away from this approach where there's like one specific type of key that you have to have to an approach where your account is protected by EVM code. And if you move toward that approach, then basically, like you can have multi-sigs, you can have keys in trusted hardware, you can have quantum proof systems, like you can have pretty much anything, right? And so that's the way to improve on the first. And then on the second, which is making sure users understand what they're signing, there's like a lot of alternative wallets that are improving on those. Like there's a UX problem. This is a UX problem, right?
Are there any wallet projects that you are keen on?
So I've recently been exploring Rabby. That's RABBY. So they do a lot of interesting stuff. Like when you're signing a transaction, they do a simulation that says like, as a result of your transaction, we expect that like these are the changes that are going to happen. Like you're going to lose this number of these coins, you're going to gain this number of these coins, and like people can see like what they're what's probably going to happen as a result of their transaction. Then there's like specific alerts for specific cases. So one of them is like if you're trading on DeFi and your trade will have a price impact of more than 10%, right? So like you're trading so much that like your trade by itself drops the price by enough that you're going to get less than 10% than the market price, or more than 10% below the market price, right? And they give you a warning on that, and you have to like explicitly click the warning and say like, yes, I understand that this is happening, right? Every time you send coins to a new address, you have to like click and say, yes, I understand I'm doing this, right? So they've done like a pretty good job of actually, like doing these things and making the UI much safer, which I really respect. And I expect wallets as a sector are going to improve a lot over the next few years. I think also for any devs that are listening to this, another important aspect of this is that I think wallets are one of those spaces that are particularly open for non-Western developers to like come in and make a big impact. I think the reason is that like, I mean, in general, like these spaces are hard to get into because there's the language barrier, there's often this technology understanding barrier. But with the wallet design in particular, like one of the things, right, is that like if you're in the US, then you generally know much more about like fancy cryptography, like how 12th degree polynomials work, like super crazy fancy stuff. But the kind of expertise that's like actually much better, definitely in China and Southeast Asia, I expect here as well, expect in Africa as well, is expertise about how to make things that appeal to and work well for users, right? Like the sectors that like worked really well in China, for example, are like consumer payments, and like you have like really amazing UIs, right? And wallets are a space where like better UIs are needed, right?
Yeah.
Both better UIs to like give people something where they can understand how to use it, and UIs to protect people from attempts to trick them, basically, right? Like that's the unique thing in crypto, is like crypto is a battleground, and like, you know, you need to like really build these UIs that do a good job of keeping regular users safe, right? And like that area is a challenge where I think like it's like a big open opportunity for teams from like Argentina and Latin America to do a
We have some great wallet developers in this town.
yeah, and absolutely, right. So highly encourage people to work on that. But I'm seeing a lot of progress in all three of those, right? So seeing progress in account abstraction, progress in light clients, and progress in just wallets having better UIs for their users, right?
Amazing.
Yeah. Privacy is a third one. So, obviously Tornado Cash and like that whole stuff happened last year. And this year, myself and a couple of other people published this paper on privacy pools, which is basically a protocol by which you can keep your anonymity when you participate in your privacy system, but at the same time you prove that you're not one of the bad guys, right? So the idea is like, imagine a Tornado Cash type system where you have regular people throwing in their money, but then you also have like DeFi hackers, right? And then when you take your money out, what you do is you make a proof that says, I'm one of the people. I'm not going to reveal which one. I am going to reveal that I have not withdrawn already, right? Because you have to do preventable spending. But then I'm also going to reveal that I am not one of these people on the list of one of these people who are on the list of like sanctioned addresses or DeFi hackers or whatever. Right?
A more compliant Tornado Cash.
Exactly, and it's like compliant, but it's like not compliant in like that really lame backdoor way where the CIA can see everything you're doing. Right. So this is like one of those really fascinating things about.
I remember the paper. Are there any teams developing or working on this?
Yes. So there are privacy projects that are already using it. So Railway.xyz is already using this. Nocturne is already using it. There's a couple of more that are being built. So yes, there are projects that are already using this kind of technology, and there's like it feels like workable privacy is like actually making a comeback, which I think is super amazing.
Amazing. You mentioned briefly throughout the interview the war in Ukraine. I wanted to, what's your impression about what's going on over there? Zelensky was recently here in Argentina. What's your current take on what's happening over there? I know this is a matter very close to your heart and to your family.
It's unfortunately, it's like entering this kind of, World War I style long grind, which is like very unhealthy in a lot of ways, right? It's, it's unhealthy just because people are dying. I think it's like unhealthy for the human spirit because there's this effect, though, like it happened in World War I as well, where when in the first few months, like if you have a good cause, then people are excited, and there's the spirit of like we're all coming together to defend. You could think of it as defend the nation. You could think about it as defend liberty, defend civilization,
peace, democracy.
Exactly, fight for peace. But then, as things drag on, it's like that disappears, and it's just like more people are suffering, right? And like it's there's definitely a lot of people who are suffering mentally. There's casualties are definitely racking up more and more, and I think the country definitely really values and benefits from all of the outside support that it's getting, and there's definitely people who are afraid that like the West has this sort of thing where like everyone gets excited about the current thing, and while the current thing is Ukraine, like that's good for Ukraine, but then people get distracted by like whether it's Israel and Gaza or whether it's something else, and that just makes it easy to kind of forget and quietly give up. And I think it's important to just remember that like wars still going on. 18% of the country is still under occupation, and it's like really not a good place to be living. And I think we want peace, but the important thing about the peace is like it needs to be a durable peace, right? And the problem is like Putin is very good at like making peace that is not durable, that is basically just an opportunity for him to rearm and get ready for round two, right? Like this happened in Georgia, this happened in Chechnya, this also happened in Ukraine itself to some extent.
With Crimea.
Exactly, and the Donbass. So, whatever the peace is, like it needs to be a peace that makes Ukrainians confident that like their country is safe and that their freedoms are safe, and that this is an environment where also foreigners can come in and be confident in investing and making partnerships and working with the country, and that's because that's it is also one of the unfortunately lowest GDP countries in Europe, and it needs to. And there is an opportunity for it to have a path out of that, right? Because like what Poland did over the last 30 years is super impressive, right? Poland went from being a very poor Soviet country to being something that's like almost as rich as Japan, right? And there is an opportunity for Ukraine to do that, but for that to happen, like the conditions for wealth building need to exist, right? And a big part of that is just the confidence that the country is not going to become a war zone again, and like another 20% of it is not going to get conquered again in 10 years, right? And that's something that Ukraine really needs, and so I think they really appreciate Milei standing up for them, and they appreciate America and Western countries continuing to stand up for them and give them support to the extent that they have, I think it's like an amazing place with a lot of amazing people, including a lot of amazing crypto developers.
You can now count Argentina is definitely going to be very supportive of Zelensky and Ukraine.
Yes, of course, and you're always welcome here.
Absolutely.
Vitalik, it has been a true honor to have you visiting us here at the last frontier, the final frontier.
La última frontera.
La última frontera. Realmente ha sido una edición histórica. Yo personalmente quiero agradecer a todo el equipo que nos ha acompañado, a la gente de Filo News, a nuestros auspiciantes, a todos los auspiciantes que hemos tenido a lo largo del año, Globant, Mercado Libre, Ripio, todos los que nos han ido acompañando. No hubiéramos llegado acá si no fuera por el esfuerzo de toda la comunidad, todo el ecosistema Web3, el ecosistema tecnológico del capitalismo tecnológico nacional, a todos ustedes los que nos están viendo, los militantes del saber. Este es un programa que lo hacemos para diseminar conocimiento, para abrir cabezas y para soñar el futuro.
Sí, somos militantes del saber. De vuelta, la verdad un orgullo y un honor estar acá con vos, Vitalik, y creo que te esperamos en diciembre del año que viene, ¿no?
Lo hacemos una tradición, Vita.
Sí.
Muchas gracias por venir. Amigos, this has been the final frontier. See you next year. Thank you for being there. Aguante los militantes del saber, the knowledge fighters of the world, unite. Nos vemos el año que viene.
Chau. Soy un token no fungible, en tu wallet es posible.
Crucé la